In the first episode of Band of Brothers, we all saw how Captain Sobel was fooled by E Company's comedian, George Luz. Luz is shown to be quite the mimic. But did Band of Brothers show the real George Luz? Was he really a fighting comedian? We're going to ask his son while we watch clips from the show. And we have the only interview ever filmed with George.
What happened to us in Normandy was I was flying in. I happened to look out and I could see the beach.
Hey, welcome to Mark's Game Room, and it's a special day here. We have George Luz with us, with all my great friends, and we're going to do a watch-along of scenes from Band of Brothers, our favorite World War II show. And we're going to talk to George. He's going to fill us in with some cool moments and give us maybe a different perspective on the show and help us answer the question, is the portrayal of George Luz, your favorite paratrooper comedian, accurate? So did your dad talk a lot about the war growing up?
Yeah, I was really pretty fortunate. You know, we went to reunions as when we were kids.
Yeah.
At 1965 was our very first reunion in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So that's when I got a chance to meet the guys who my dad served with. And over the years, we went to more reunions, and you got a better understanding of everything they kind of dealt with. So he did share a lot of stories, and so I've been very blessed.
Oh, awesome. Well, thanks for sharing it with us.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I had a grandfather who was in World War II, but he wouldn't talk about it hardly ever.
Same way with my dad. He hardly ever talked about it. I think that was pretty common.
Yeah, you know, when you talk to guys that didn't really want to talk about it, you think they saw some awful things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't want their kids to experience that stuff.
Yeah, it could be.
Terrible stuff.
Dads.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get on to Band of Brothers and see if the portrayal is accurate.
All right.
Platoon, sir? What is the goddamn hold-up, Mr. Sobel? A fence! Sir, a barbed wire fence! Oh, that dog just ain't gonna hunt.
So please tell me that's true.
Yeah, well, it certainly is true. It's in a story I remember as a kid, and hearing that story and then reading it in the book, and then fortunately enough, we all had a chance to see it on it, which is really neat to be able to do that.
So funny.
They always talk about Sobel and how well he was a trainer, but he just really wasn't. He wouldn't have been good in combat, and we all kind of learned that. So. Interesting story was I met his son, Michael Sobel, at the 2003 reunion in Phoenix.
Wow.
Yeah, I was in Phoenix, and he had come, and I'm sure there was a certain amount of apprehension with him coming to the reunion.
How his dad was portrayed. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and as soon as he came and somebody said, hey, there's Michael Sobel. So I quickly thought, all right, let me grab him, and I'm going to bring him to the closest first guy that somebody, that knew his, and they all knew his dad. But there was a guy, Bill Wingett, who was a terrific guy, and Bill always had a little bit of a different take on Sobel. And I introduced myself, brought him over to Wingett, and he started talking to Wingett, and then from Wingett he went to Bill, and then he went to Babe and Buck and Don and Frank Briccani and on and on and on. He talked to all of the guys in the unit. And later on that evening, he was the speaker at our event. And it was great. I think it provided him an opportunity to tell us about his dad and the way he viewed his dad, which was refreshing for all of us. Plus, I'm sure it really helped him.
Yeah.
So that was really neat.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
how did he see his dad?
Oh, much different. He said his dad was, like the life of the party.
Huh.
When they would get together with family events, his dad was just a funny guy.
Wow.
Did he have any criticism about the show for his portrayal?
Well, he didn't tell me that, but I can imagine he did. I can imagine, you know.
You don't exactly come away from the show with a positive impression of Solo,
man.
right? I mean, that's
Gotta be tough.
it's pretty brutal to see your dad like shown that way, right?
To a certain degree with Michael is we had a little chat joking about, you know, my dad imitating Major Horton. So we kind of chuckled about that, but I'm not sure he chuckled as much as I did. It was certainly kind of funny. It was certainly kind of funny. But
So your dad said he did that. And was your dad a mimic? Like, could he do these impressions?
yeah, he was very talented with things like that, and so yeah, he could tell jokes, and well, I think everybody could tell jokes, but he could tell jokes, and yeah, he had a way of diffusing difficult situations through humor.
Yeah. Yeah. One of those is coming up in something you shared with me with
All right, cool.
Major Winners.
Okay, yeah,
Right.
that's a good one too.
All
I
right,
love
so
that one.
you've heard it here first in Mark's Game Room from George Luz that the cutting the fence scene is authentic.
Really happened.
So that's good, man. We love it. Okay,
That's all right.
we're going to move on to Normandy. And I think on this one, we're going to start with a clip from your dad from a reunion talking about being on the aircraft.
Look at me. With a leg pack that weighed over 150 pounds. That was mine too. Well, anyway, number 18 man gets in first, 17, 16. And Lieutenant Wells was left behind me. And it took two guys from the Air Corps to pick me up into that plane. Before I go on, he mentioned a guy named Cobb.
This is wearing the radio.
What's that again? Oh, could be any more. And I'm fifth man in sick. Fifth. I said to Lieutenant Welch, I'll never make the door. He said, well, change with Top. You just heard what happened to Top. He was shot in the room.
There's a scene in Band of Brothers where you see Cobb get shot in the aircraft. Presumably, that was George Luz's plane. But let's hear from him what he had to say about being on the plane and jumping.
What happened was in Normandy was as we were flying in, I happened to look out and I could see the beach. And when they stand up and hook up, I asked the guy, one of the crew chiefs, what time is it? And he said it's 1:30. So we stood up and hooked up, and there's a box above the door. When the red light comes on, you hook up.
It's going, guys.
When the green light comes on, you go. What happened, any aircraft shell started exploding, and it shorted out the box.
Oh, wow.
It was going red, green, and we were waiting.
Yeah.
Finally, the navigator came out from the cockpit and said, what are you guys doing in here? We were about, let's say, 3 to 4 minutes late.
Wow. That put you a long way back.
Right. When we landed, I expected to see, at least 3 or 4 guys around me.
Yeah.
But I was all alone.
Wow.
I went out, it's about 1:30, and I didn't get back to my company until 7:45 in the morning.
Wow.
7:45.
All night.
All night. And the invasion, when they started shooting the Navy, I swear to hell, I saw those shells. They were so huge.
Yeah.
And I teamed up with another officer from headquarters company, and we going over the hedgerows, and we finally went up and met him.
That's a crazy story.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, he said the flak was so thick, and then he said, when you were coming down, man, you could see the German, you could see the traces, killing your buddies.
Yeah. That's terrible.
Jeez.
And that was his first combat jump,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So the first time he experienced flak
yeah.
and jump into fire like that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Do you know how many of the other guys he was with had jumped before, or were they all all new.
Well, they were all just jump qualified because airborne was a brand new concept,
Right.
and so this was their first. This was their first jump into combat for all these guys.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's kind of strange for us because we're used to like a very professional
Mm-hmm.
military. Like all these guys were just normal guys who volunteered because that's what everyone was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He says in the opening clip that your dad landed because of the problem with the jump lights. They were way off course.
Yeah.
He was alone. He finds his way to the company at 8 o'clock. And so the famous scene that we all know and love, right, attacking the guns at Breakcore Manor, he's not there.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
Right, because he's not.
They probably didn't need a radio man either. I'm not sure.
No. They probably could have used his comedy. Though.
Probably didn't need a radio man.
Yeah. All right. But you shared with me and all of us a clip from Buck Compton, which is really kind of cool because when I listened to the clip and then I watched the Breakcore gun scene, it just gave me a little cool perspective on it that I hadn't saw before. And so I just want to play it. We can all see it.
Sure.
Hopefully you guys maybe.
Yeah.
And you just want to focus on Compton and his gun.
Sure.
But we're going to start with this. So thanks again for sharing this. Was this from the book opening or from a reunion?
Yes, this was from the book opening.
All right. So here we go about Compton.
A guy by the name of McMillan was from D Company, a lieutenant was laying on the side of the road. He had a broken leg and he had one of these Thompson submachine guns. And I said, look, I haven't got a weapon and you're better off without one. The Germans get you, they'll have an excuse to shoot you, and if the medics get you, you won't need it. So I only have your gun, so he gives me a gun. Didn't have a chance to shoot it all night. The first time I had a chance to shoot it, I was going to do one of these Jimmy Cagney things from the movies. Ejected live round that had a broken firing.
We're on target.
Yeah, here it comes. Submachine gun.
No!
There it is.
Check the equipment you found.
It's cool how they put that detail in there, though. And they didn't make a big deal of it, you know. It's just
No,
like,
it's just a moment, right?
but
it's
but
in there.
If I keep watching, it's kind of cool. Like you'll see, he keeps trying to fix it through the whole scene. Look, he's trying to fix the gun.
Yep.
Oh, all right.
See? Isn't that cool? It doesn't fix it. That is awesome.
He's so sad.
What's happening? I'm gonna go and see what's keeping him lifted. All right. Toy, cover your lieutenant!
He's still holding on to that gun.
That's why he tells someone else to cover him, because his gun's not working.
Yeah.
So I guess, George, my kind of question is, in that scene, you see Joe Toy, I've got twice, Popeye gets shot in the butt, Malarkey goes and chases after a Luger that's not there. Did you meet all these people? Did you know them
sure.
all?
Yeah. If in the series, all of the guys who survived, I knew most all of those guys that went to reunions. I was really blessed, the ones that came to reunions. You had Don Malarkey, you had Walter Gordon, Winters, Shifty, Earl McClung, Wild Bill, Buck Compton, and I was always blessed to be able to, when my dad had died, I was able to kind of reconnect with all of the guys.
Nice.
And they, I wasn't Luz, but I was Luz's kid.
Right.
And they filled the void. They really, I don't know if they understood. I certainly didn't at the time, but they filled a big void, when my dad was killed. And kind of bringing me into individually bringing me into themselves and sharing stuff and just being there when I called.
Wow.
And so that was the really neat thing, was being able to connect with them. My dad, he loved these guys and they loved him.
Yeah.
So
The Band of Brothers extended to you, right? That they
Yeah,
brought you in.
yeah.
Nice.
Did your dad bring back any kind of souvenirs?
Well, I could kind of get a story about that, but there was a famous picture at the end of the war, if you remember, in Caproon. They were up against the side in this big field there, and all of the guys were there. It was like the final company picture. So somebody says, "Hey, so where's your dad in this picture?" It's like, well, he wasn't in that picture. Why wasn't he in the picture? Well, what had happened was my dad, just about the end of the war, they were in Birch's Garden, Caproon area, and so he's walking down the road, and here comes a German on a motorcycle. So he levels his gun, and he tells the German to get off the bike. Now the German is yelling at him in German, probably telling him, "Hey buddy, the war's over." But my dad doesn't speak German, and he doesn't speak English. So he gets the guy off the bike. My dad gets on the bike. It took him about 20 minutes to figure out how to ride it. Because, he grew up in a depression. He didn't have any motorcycles. Probably didn't even have a bicycle. So he's ambling on down the road, and then here comes a couple of German girls yell his way, and he turns, and he looks back, and for that split second, he took his eyes off the road and hit this bridge above him.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he hit this bridge above him and ended up in a big crumple.
Oh.
And the MPs came and picked him up, and he ended up in the hospital.
Oh.
And the war was just about over. So he went in the hospital, and you get in the hospital, they cut all your stuff off, your clothes, and then they patching you up, and you're laying there for all that time. And then his Foot Locker probably got rifled through. Luz isn't going to be back for a while.
Right.
He's not back at all.
You're not going to need
So
this.
he came back with absolutely nothing.
Oh.
Actually, he came back with a packing paddle, which is a little wooden paddle like this big, about this, thick, and just a quarter of an inch, and that's how they got the knots out of the string, the line of the shoe.
Well,
Yeah. But anyway,
All right.
yeah.
All right.
Let's move on at the war with Band of Brothers here, everyone. Let's see what we got next.
Don't steal a bike. Karma will get you.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, stay off that motorcycle.
All right,
That's right.
Carrington.
That's right.
Oh boy.
There, this is the big combat scene. Just did he talk about this particular thing? Did he talk about combat at all? I mean, a lot of times for veterans, they don't really want to talk about combat.
Yeah, he didn't really talk about, and a lot of guys always added humor to most everything they talked about. So he didn't talk a lot about that particular part of it. He did tell me one story. I think he was with Spears, and I can't remember exactly where it was. It could have been here. I'm not sure exactly, but he talked about coming up to a German who was wounded, and so they're trying to interrogate him and just get some information out of him. So he calls him. The German called him Dummkopf. And Spears figured, okay, I guess I'm not going to get anything out of him. So he had his Tommy gun down, pointing to the ground, and he just riddled the guy from his toes to his head.
Wow. Wow.
And just, and that was it. Yeah. So that was the one story that he did tell me. Now, I'm trying to think if he inferred that it was Spears. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah. All right. I guess just one other quick comment. I read on your advice David Webster's book, Parachute Infantry, and there is a chunk where he talks about your dad a lot. And one thing he said was in his dealing with your dad, that your dad was the same whether he was in garrison or whether he was in combat. Right? That he always had that kind of fun attitude.
Yeah, he said whether he was in garrison or combat, he was always the same.
Right.
Crazy.
So, I do have a question. Do you know how he became a radio man in the first place? Like how to get picked for the job or end up in it?
I'm not sure.
I think in the Army they just decide.
I think they do, yeah.
Yeah, they're like, oh, you're a 4-star chef, you're a radio man. You're a mechanic, you're a chef.
Well, that's a good question. I think the series itself, for me, provided me with more questions than answered. Because I knew a lot of the stories,
Right.
and then having read the book and stuff like that. But when the series came out, I was like, oh golly, I wish Dad was here. I could just pepper him with all kinds of cool questions.
Oh sure.
That's sad. Yeah.
So,
in episode 7, George Luz gets caught in an artillery barrage outside of Bastogne, where 2 of his fellow members of Easy Company are killed.
Splinters from the tree. The air bursts in the trees. Terrifying. Oh, yeah.
Lucky strikes.
Get one of these real quick.
Yeah.
Share.
Is your dad a smoker?
oh yeah.
No.
Actually, I brought him cigarettes
Oh.
when I went to the set.
Who, the actor?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
he gave me that lighter.
Really?
Yeah, he gave me that lighter.
Cool. That is cool. That's it. Awesome. Well, obviously this is another big scene with your dad. So is that how it went down? Do you know?
Well, Shifty actually put it a good way. He said, George, it might have happened. It just might not have happened that way. But in this particular case, there was a little bit of drama.
Right.
We all know Muck and Pinkala got killed. And I can talk a lot about that. But in this particular case here, my dad had actually written about how it went down. And I can kind of read that to you. After the attack, we moved up to a different position. It was late in the afternoon, we started to dig in. I was told to go back to battalion and get some big shovels. What took place after I got back was unbelievable. 2 buddies of mine, Muck and Pinkala, had dug in a hole 6 feet long by 6 feet wide by 2 feet deep. Not having a hole dug, they asked if I wouldn't mind sharing theirs. But being a thick-headed Portuguese, I refused. I finally dug a slit trench 6 feet long by 1 foot deep. Then came the artillery shells falling all around. Then one fell mighty close. As daylight came, someone asked me to wake up Muck and Pinkala. I looked in the hole and saw nothing but dirt. I jumped in the hole and started digging with my hands. I felt their sleeping bags and pulled them both out. Dead. They took a direct hit. I'll always thank God for my thick head.
Wow.
Well, it was the second time, right? Like he changes place with Cobb in the airplane, doesn't get shot. And
Sure.
he doesn't stay with these guys. It's just like your dad was lucky too.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah,
really
you got to be lucky.
Was he ever wounded at all over there? Besides crashing into a car, just checking out some women.
Motorcycle, yeah.
Well, he was wounded several times.
Yeah, wow.
He did get a Purple Heart, and he was wounded several times. One of the times his foot got run over by, I think they were in Holland. Yeah, not soon after they got into Holland. His foot got run over by a horse-drawn carriage. So that wasn't good. And then another time, he got KP for doing something. Because, in the military, a lot of guys would do something and they would rip stripes off, and then they would put stripes back on and rip stripes off. So it was one of those kinds of things. He had done something stupid, like went out on leave. Him and Garnier went out on leave, and he ended up getting some sort of KP duty where he had to light some sort of some sort of a gas stove, and he reached down in there and tried to light the thing. It wouldn't light up, and then boom, it lit up all at one time. All his eyelashes got burned, his eye got burned, and stuff like that. So he got wounded in many different ways.
Yeah, sounds like you got an exciting variety.
So yeah, but some of the interesting little details with that is, and this is, for me, this is the toughest episode to watch. I remember watching a rough cut of this at the final U.S. premiere, which was in New Orleans. The Gordon girls had gotten a copy of episode 7, and we watched that one, and that was... Yeah, that was the toughest episode to watch. Because, you know, Marcus McCullough got killed, Hubler gets killed, you know, Buck gets shot, and all this other stuff. And, you know, a lot of guys get killed in that one. Yeah. Garnier and Heffron, Garnier and Toy each lose a leg. Yeah, 7. Bastogne was the toughest.
Episode 8 is also fairly grim, and there's a short scene where George is handing out Hershey bars.
Come on, George. Just give me, I don't know, 10. Here you go. 10, 15 bars. Juicy fruit. Happy?
But listen for this short line about a house.
I want you to lay a few bazooka rounds into a house across the river. I think we could get at least one Hershey bar for that. Come on, Luz. Your first platoon at
Vicinity, yeah. All right, then I'll join you.
Where are we going?
To the house. I got a blast.
Is Captain Winter's going to be with him?
Jeez, what? I don't know. Maybe.
He smokes.
It's gonna blast the house, right? It's a really interesting scene. I kind of remember that line, and it's just like, it's gonna blast the house, right? But then we start chatting. There's a whole deal behind that, isn't there?
Well, the amazing thing is, you know, when you read Webster's book, he describes it really quite well, and I'll kind of read it. So they were in Haguenau, and they were placed in this outpost, clearly visible from our cellar window. About 100 yards away in enemy territory was a silent and presumably unoccupied house. Thinking no one lived there, we raised and lowered our blackout shutters every night and every morning until we realized that theirs are open and closed too. So then they noticed that they've got neighbors, the undesirable neighbors. So anyway, they decided to remedy this evil immediately. Since the house was too close to our lines for indirect mortar fire, artillery fire, so we called for a bazooka. The company comedian, a blithe Portuguese named Luz, who was then playing Bazooka Man, trotted down from company headquarters and ran out from behind a fence post opposite the enemy house, laughing and shouting, shot 3 rounds into the basement, stimulating the occupants and permanently opening up the shutters. So having traveled to Haguenau many times, I've often wondered, where is that house? So I got a Facebook message from a young kid named Tom Fry and his lovely girlfriend or wife Marion, and he said he's from Haguenau, and I said, you wouldn't happen to know what house that is? And he said, I do. And I said, holy moly. So we talked about it. So he explained where OP3 is. So directly across from OP3, across this river, is a series of houses. So he went to this one house. He went to the houses, and he found this little old lady, this 90-year-old lady, who said, when we came back in February of... February of 45, the interior of the house was blasted to bits.
Oh, courtesy of George Luz.
Yeah.
I got news for you, man.
So anyway, so I met Tom on my last trip with Chris Anderson and Stephen Ambrose, and so we went right to the spot, right next to the fence post. And it had a nice view over this little bridge right to the place.
Right.
So yeah, Tom Fry. It's amazing, you know, these young historians. He's a police officer and a historian, and they appreciate history. They appreciate the sacrifice of the men and women of World War II, and because of him, I was able to close the loop on that story.
That's awesome.
Oh,
That's really cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's some real in-person research.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
In episode 10, they characterized George's life after the war.
George Luz became a handyman in Providence, Rhode Island. As a testament to his character, 1,600 people attended his funeral in 1998.
So amazing. I mean, I think when they wrote this, right, these guys were still alive, and in this scene, it talks about that, so you kind of have a sense that, you know, they were still with us, but now we know they're gone, you know. And so your dad, he was not a handyman, right? Do I understand correctly?
Well, I remember the phone call that we got from HBO. Eric Jenderson, I think, was one of the guys that I called. And I had to be a Wednesday night because I used to go to Mom and Dad's for Wednesday. It was Prince Spaghetti night, laundry day.
Yeah.
You know, Mom would do my laundry for me. So the phone rang, and it was Eric, and I talked to him very briefly, and then I gave the call to my mom, and then she talked to him. And I remember her saying something about, you know, he was really handy around the house and stuff, and you know, when he was, you know, she was just describing, you know, what he did and stuff like that. So he was handy. He wasn't a handyman. You know, a handyman is a guy with a station wagon full of stuff. Right. With a ladder lashed to the roof, you know, and he's doing, you know, and he's, you know, putting up curtain rods, and you know, a handyman in today's business is making good money. Yeah, sure. Back in the day, a handyman. But anyway, yeah. So he wasn't a handyman. He worked for the government. He worked for the government. He worked for the state of Rhode Island, and he built houses. He was a painter. He was a handy guy for sure. Right. You know, he was a handy guy for sure. And a quick story about with Rick in the dog tags. Oh. Not only did he give me the cigarette lighter, but he gave me a pair of his dog tags.
Wow. The actor, Rick Gomez.
Yeah, Rick Gomez. Yeah. So he did that.
What'd you think of his performance?
Oh, he did a fabulous job. We're so proud of Rick, the work that he did, and because, you know, he didn't have my dad as a resource. Yeah. Right. But he did have Webster's book. He had the book Band of Brothers, and then what he would do is he would talk to Frank. He could talk to Frank Riccani. He could talk to Wild Bill, and he could talk to these guys because those guys all had, you know, veterans that they could talk with. Yeah. Right. And I know when my wife Susan and I went to the set, and it was really cool for me to visit with all these young actors who were playing guys that I knew, and it was really special for me to meet them. And I think in a certain sort of way they got a kick out of, you know, meeting Luz's kid, but it was really neat to meet them and for guys that I knew, and how proud they were, and how great ambassadors they are for not just the Easy Company guys, but for veterans in general, and they continue to do stuff with that in mind, and so it's been a pretty cool ride.
That's great. So, getting to kind of answer our initial question, George, like how true of a portrayal is this? I want to start by saying, so one of the reasons you're here, right, is because your family grew up 20 minutes from my family. Yeah. Right? And like, I wish I had known you guys when I was younger. But
I know, because your enthusiasm for history
is incredible. Right? And when I was watching Band of Brothers the very first time, I remember this. As the show went on, I kept saying to myself, God, that guy Luz feels so familiar to me. He just did. For some reason, of all the characters, you know, his look. Yeah. And I realized at the end when it says he was in Providence, Rhode Island. Yeah. It just went off. I was like, oh, of course. Like, he looks like my friends who are all Portuguese Americans. He's a brilliant character like my friends who are Portuguese Americans. And so, and then we were able to connect. Yeah. And I mean, you know, of all the people I would love to do what we're doing, it's with you and George Luz because essentially we're neighbors. Yeah. Right? Yeah, for sure. From that part of the world. For sure. And so the feeling I get because of that is I think the portrayal is pretty good. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Oh, no, I agree.
Rick did a fabulous job, and, you know, writers are great writers, and actors are great actors. So, And hey, they wrote some additional funny lines. He had some good material, and we're very, very happy.
Yeah.
And then I think what my dad would think about the series coming out would be, hopefully a lot of the other guys who served in World War II, the 16 million men and women who served, had their nieces and nephews and brothers and sons and daughters, maybe ask them a question. Maybe they could share some of their stories, because we all know everybody who served had a story.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I think that's the biggest takeaway for me, is that he would really hope that that would have happened to many, many more of the men. We were we're here in D.C., and he always used to lament the fact, when are they going to build a monument for the World War II veterans? He would always ask that question, and there was always these causes to donate money and things like that, and to raise money, and he just couldn't figure it out. He said, "What in the world?"
I mean, it is pretty crazy that it took so long.
It took so long. I know.
Yeah.
It's the biggest war. I mean, guys.
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense there, but yeah, and hey, I can't thank you enough for inviting me to hang out with you guys.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, man. It's so great.
Yeah, that was terrific.
Yeah, this has been terrific.
This is super fun.
Terrific.
Well, thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed our time with George. He's really great. And just a little plug, if you're interested in going to Band of Brothers tours, George is hooked up with Stephen Ambrose tours. You can go on tour with him, and I'm sure it's totally fantastic. So thanks for watching Mark's Game Room. We'll catch you next time.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.